You're editing a project for a client. The hours have all began to blur together. The edit's completion is visible now, though, peeking over the horizon of stacked timelines. That's when you get the message. Like a digital curse. More creative transitions? Did they not see the delicate symphony of film burns I added?
Maybe it needs more film burn. After hours spent grasping at the faded embers of creativity, your heart racing, mind spinning, glowing screens searing your eyes, staring into the void of the timeline.
Still, nothing.
Reality is completely shattered. Now your mind is broken and chaos erupts as you let out
A primal scream.
That was actually pretty cool. Let's just do that. Alright y'all, I hope you guys enjoyed that little intro. Figured it'd be a fun way to introduce the effect that we're going to learn today, which is that infinite zoom transition right at the very end of that sequence. So let's get right to it. First thing you're going to want to do, just make sure that your clips are ready on the timeline. You just need the two that you're going to make the transition between. Once you've found that, you're just going to want to find the frame that you want the transition to start on and go ahead and make a cut. And if there's any footage to the right of that cut, go ahead and delete that. Then with your clip selected, go ahead and hit R, and that'll bring up this retime menu. We're just going to click freeze frame, and okay. That's turned our clip into a freeze frame. Now we can just stretch that out until it's overlapping with the clip where we're going to transition onto. So the next thing you're going to want to do is right click on the clip and go to where it says new Fusion clip, hit that, and then we can just go ahead and head over into Fusion. Once you've opened up that clip into Fusion, you'll see you have your media in over here. That's just going to be our image, which we have dragged up in our viewer. If you don't know how to get them in the viewers, there's two ways of doing it. These little dots down here, you can either press 1 or 2 and it'll bring it up in your viewers. Or the way I like to do it is you just grab it and flick it towards the viewer and it goes right in. That's the simplest way to do it in my opinion. And we don't need to see both the viewers, so I'm just going to hit that window icon and it'll just isolate it to one viewer. First thing we're going to want to do is get our subject isolated. So to do that, we're going to grab a polygon node and just go ahead and connect that to the blue input of your media in one. Once you've connected that, you'll see nothing, and it's not very helpful for masking. So we'll go over to the inspector and hit invert, and that'll pull your image back up and we're all good to go. You're just going to want to start carefully tracing around the outline of your subject. The more time you take on it, the better it's going to look in the end, so take your time. So once we've got all that masked out, it's time to set up our 3D scene. So to do that, we're going to come over here and grab a 3D image plane node. Then you're going to want to grab your 3D merge, then your 3D render, and last but not least, your 3D camera. First, we're going to take our media in and we're going to connect it to the image plane 3D. We're going to take that, connect it to a merge 3D, then the render 3D, so line those up. And then we're going to take the camera 3D and connect that to the merge 3D. Now we can go ahead and pull back up our second viewer by hitting that window icon in the top right again. And take that merge 3D node and just flick it to that first viewer and it'll pull up your 3D scene. If you've never worked in 3D scenes before, there's a few ways to move around. You're going to use your middle mouse button to pan side to side or up and down, and if you hold Alt while doing that, that's how you rotate the scene. And you zoom in and out just like you would on the normal timeline. Alright, so now we're going to want to take that 3D render and flick it up to our second viewer, and you're not going to see anything at first. This is because we have to adjust the 3D camera. There's a couple different ways you can do this. If you look in the viewer, you'll see a blue arrow coming out of the back of it. That's going to move us along the Z-axis. And then we've got a green arrow that comes out of the top of it and a red arrow on the side of it. If you move the green arrow, you're going to go up and down on the Y-axis, and the red arrow will move you left to right on the X-axis. The other way that you can move it around is in your inspector panel. If you come up to transform, you'll have your X, Y, and Z for your translation and rotation. I like to do it in the viewer, it just feels better to me. So if you go ahead and grab that blue arrow coming off the back, and we start to pull that back, you'll see the image start to line up in the second viewer. And then we can just go ahead and use the X, Y, and Z axis arrows to line it up so that it's fit perfectly in the frame. The next thing you're going to want to do is select the media in polygon and image 3D plane nodes, and we're going to copy those using Ctrl+C and then paste those about 5 times. You can do more sets or less, it's all up to you. More will allow you to have a longer zoom, but keep in mind that it gets very resource heavy the more copies you have, so do what your computer can handle. Don't want to deal with a bunch of crashes, that's never fun. Go ahead and get those organized. I always try and keep an organized node tree. It makes things a lot more simple in the long run. Not trying to search for a random node when I'm trying to do something later on. An organization can look different for different people, so just do something that makes sense to you, that's all that matters. Once you get all those set up, you're going to want to start taking all your image plane 3D nodes and plugging those into the merge 3D node. And if you look up in your viewer, you're not going to see anything different. That's because they're all stacked on top of each other right now. So selecting on your first image plane 3D node, we're going to use the arrows to push it back along the Z-axis. And you're going to want to start moving that second image back until you can start to see the edges of it inside that masked out area of your first image. And from there, you're just going to repeat the same process with the rest of them, making sure to click on the image plane 3D node so you know you're moving the right one, and then just use the Z-axis to move it back and forth. You want to make sure that they're not too far apart, or when you're moving through with the 3D camera, you'll see outside of the image. You might also notice as I'm going through that some of my nodes are off and I'm turning them back on. That's just to help with system performance. The ones that I don't need to currently see, I'll just leave them off. So if you're struggling with performance, that's something you can do. Just select the nodes and hit Ctrl+P, that'll turn them off, Ctrl+P, turn them back on. Once all of those are lined up, you're going to want to come back down, select on your camera 3D node, and you're just going to want to try and get that lined up with the masked out area of your image, so that when you're pushing the camera forward, it will fly through smoothly and not clip the edges. Doesn't need to be perfect right now because we're about to move all these anyways, but I just want to get that general alignment. And I'm going to go ahead and shut off these nodes, we don't need those right now. And then we're going to want to start setting the rotation for our image plane 3Ds. So clicking on that first image plane, and come up to the Z rotation and enter 72. And for each image plane node, we're just going to enter a multiple of 72 until we reach 360 on that last one, and our image will be fully rotated back around. Alright, now that we've got those all lined up, what we're going to want to do now is start adjusting each image individually as we push our camera through. So this white line, that represents the path of the camera. So we're going to start pushing the camera forward, and as we do that, we're just going to make sure that that stays lined up with all the images so that nothing ends up clipping when we animate it. Alright, so once we've got that first image lined up, we're going to want to come down here and make sure that our playhead is on the first frame of our composition. Then moving to the inspector panel, you're just going to want to set keyframes on the X, Y, and Z for translation and rotation. Then we're going to want to come down and grab our playhead and move it to the very last frame. And we're going to set those keyframes again on the XYZ for translation and rotation. And once we've done that, we can come back down and we can grab the camera and start pushing it forward till we're right at the edge of that first image. And what we're going to want to do now is come down and click on that second image plane 3D node, and then we're going to adjust the X, Y, and Z on that until it lines up with that white line that represents the path of the camera. Make sure that you're making these adjustments in the image plane 3D node and not the camera node, and we'll just go through and repeat the process for the rest of them until we get to the end. And you don't have to worry about setting keyframes on any of these ones because they're going to stay static throughout the whole animation. This is also going to be when we add some rotation to the camera. This is also going to be when we add rotation. So come down here and click on your camera 3D node, and then we're going to adjust the Z rotation just until it's about at the same angle as the image below. And that's just a rough guideline I use, doesn't have to be exact. So go ahead and get those done and then come back to the video and I will show you what to do next. Alright, so once we've got all those lined up, we're going to come back here, click on our camera node, and make sure we're on the second to last frame, not the very last one. And then we're just going to make our rotation adjustment. Then you'll skip forward to the very last frame, and that's when you'll push the camera all the way through. And at that point, you're just going to want to go back through the whole animation, just checking to see that nothing is clipping the camera as our animation plays out. And everything's looking pretty good for the most part, but when I start to play it, you'll see in that bottom left corner that we've got some outer edge exposed. So I'll just go ahead and go back in and fix that. And you can fix that by just simply going back to the first frame, selecting that camera 3D node and just making it a little more zoomed in. And then we should have a smooth animation all the way through. So the last thing we're going to want to do over in the Fusion page is go ahead and select that node, come up to the spline tab, and we can come over and just select the camera 3D node, and that'll show all the tools. And if you hit that little icon with the 2 arrows, it'll zoom it out. You can zoom it out more by dragging across the top or the sidebar. Then you're going to want to click anywhere on the graph, hit Control A, and that'll select all your points. And then next we can go ahead and hit T, and that will expose the ease in and ease out options at the top. And you can go ahead and adjust those to taste. This is just going to make it so we have a non-linear animation, makes it look smoother, less choppy. So go ahead and adjust those to your liking. And after adjusting them, this is what I ended up with. Okay, I lied, my bad. One more thing we gotta do in Fusion. We're gonna come over here to the Render 3D node, and the last thing you're gonna wanna do now is come up here to the settings and enable motion blur. This is probably also going to be set at a default number that's pretty high, so just mess around with that, do what your computer can handle, and then we can actually head back over to the edit page now. And you're going to see right here my computer gets a little bit angry at me and starts glitching, doesn't want to close this, and yeah, it's just having a little bit of lag. There is, however, a solution to this. If you go to the playback menu at the top of your screen, go to render cache, and you can either set it to user, where you'll select what gets rendered, or smart mode, and it'll select it for you. If you do set it to user mode, you're just going to want to right click on your clip, go to render cache fusion output, and turn that on. And once we turn that on, you'll see a red bar start to form above your clip. Once that turns to blue, you should have smooth playback. And the last thing that we're going to do is come to the part of the clip where we split it to make the freeze frame. And we now need to adjust that so that it matches up with the adjustments we made on the freeze frame. And then once you have it positioned correctly so that they're aligned, you're going to put a keyframe right there at the very end of that clip. Then you're going to want to go to the very beginning of that clip and set another keyframe and zoom it all the way out. You can then go in the keyframe panel below the clip by clicking on this icon and adjust those so that it's more smooth. Another way we can make this transition more seamless is by grabbing a zoom blur effect from the Open Effects panel and just place that in an adjustment clip right above our 2 clips. And this will help to blend it all together more seamlessly. And that's all you need to know to go out and make your own infinite zoom transition. If y'all got value out of this video, I'd really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. If this was your first time working in Fusion, congratulations, give yourself a pat on the back because you made it through. And not only did you do that, you worked in a 3D space, which is super impressive. If you want to see more content like this, let me know in the comments what kind of topics you want covered. Thank you all for tuning in, and until next time, take care.